Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Ta and Dr. Shekya and Dr. Zen and Victor. Everyone, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to come to our ISHE lecture. This week is we honorably invite Venerable Dr. Juewei to give us a lecture related to Platform Sutra. So let me briefly introduce the Venerable Juewei here. Venerable Dr. Juewei started her research career with strong interest in the historical study of Buddhism in China. She has authored several publications related to Buddha's birthday, including a monograph on parading the Buddha, localizing Buddha's birthday celebration that is derived from her doctoral research of Buddha's birthday parade in medieval China, published in 2012. She has since contributed to the scholarship of Buddha's birthday celebrations in Taiwan and Australia, as well as Chan Buddhism and the Chinese Buddhist concept of merit. These studies form the foundations for her ongoing research in Humanistic Buddhism, in which most of her recent publications are focused. Venerable Dr. Juewei is head of the program for Applied Buddhist Studies and Humanist Buddhism, as well as director of the Humanistic Buddhism Center at the Nantian Institute in Australia. She probably holds a PhD in religious study from the University of the West. She's our PhD graduate. So welcome, Venerable Juewei, come to the stage and share her experience and talk about the six patriarchs, the Platform Sutra of the six patriarchs, and the Humanistic Buddhism. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kuo, for the introduction. President Ta, my dear friends, old and new. It is such a privilege to be back in my alma mater. I remember days when we were in this room in 8208, listening to wonderful lectures. And it's such a pleasure to be back. I just keep recalling the memories, and I was going down the corridors, meeting old friends again, and meeting new friends, and I'm like, this is still the same University of the West, where all of us are family. And as family members, please don't get too disappointed with my presentation. I'm sharing with you something which touches my heart a lot. When Dr. Kuo asked me to present something on the Platform Sutra, or rather on Mahayana Sutras, I thought, why not just share something that really touched my heart, which is the Platform Sutra. And over this period, I'll explain to you why. When I was doing my PhD research, I dedicated 10 years. I'm a slow learner, as you can tell. It took me 10 years to finish my PhD, so none of you would beat that, so don't worry. And during those 10 years, I was really keen on learning about acculturation, how the East and West meet. And so I decided, if I'm going to dedicate that many years of my life, I have to choose something fun. So that's why I chose the Buddha's Birthday Festival, the world's oldest birthday party. And during that period of time, I learned how Indian Buddhism gradually transformed itself to becoming Chinese Buddhism from the phenomenon of the Buddha's birthday festivals, the materiality, the politics, and all. But that same interest has also driven me to go to the text. And the Platform Sutra represents that particular text that was the first among the various Chinese texts that gained the status of sutra. At the same time, It was also one of the first texts that was recognized to be Chinese Buddhism. How did that happen? And so it was through this Platform Sutra and several publications around it that I explored how the Platform Sutra came to be. But at the same time, I'm also interested how the Platform Sutra can be relevant to us today in this modern world. And that's why I also studied the Rabbit's Horn by the Venerable Master Sheng Yun, my teacher, and how he commented on it. And so what I want to do today is to explore one particular segment, which is the humanistic elements of the Platform Sutra. So I'm not going to study the entire text. I use the Red Pine translation of the Platform Sutra in this particular presentation. And I want to just draw on the humanistic elements to see how that was done from Indian Buddhism to Chinese Buddhism through the Platform Sutra. And then taking that same vein of thought for how the Venerable Master Sheng Yun interpreted the Platform Sutra for the audience of his time in the 20th century, or the late 20th century. And then I'm going to, throughout this entire exercise, share with you the kind of pedagogy that we practice in Nantian Institute. So right after my graduation here in 2012, I was assigned to the Nantian Institute in Australia, down under. And over there, we practice, well, over time we developed our form of contemplative pedagogy, where we bookend our classes with a mindful check-in and a mindful check-out. A mindful check-in is just a very brief meditation to bring us to the present moment, and a mindful check-out is for us to transfer the merits of what we have learned to all sentient beings. So, and during the class, throughout the class, we have many opportunities for sharing and reflection. So the idea is, how do these teachings and what do they mean to us in our life, in our journey of interiority? Would you like to try that with me? Yes. Is that okay? All right. Oh, you're a very adventurous group. I would like to begin by first recognizing the Triple Gem. I work in a center for research and engagement based on Buddhist values and wisdoms. Hence, I would like to recognize the Triple Gem of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Together, they make up the lineage, philosophy, and the community of Buddhism that we in the Humanistic Buddhism Center embrace to deepen our engagement, reflection, and scholarly investigation. With that, I would like to invite you to join me with the mindful check-in exercise. The Nantian Institute has developed an app, and I'm just going to play the app for us to just settle down. It will take a total of about 4 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes. Will that be all right? All right, let's do it then.
It is now time to check in. From wherever you've come, that is now behind you. Let's focus on the present, because there is nothing more important than the gift of the moment. Please ensure that you are in a safe place. You may either sit or stand with your spine upright. If your legs are crossed, uncross them. Place your hands on your sides or on your lap. Gently close your eyes. We will begin by scanning the body for any areas of tightness and relaxing those tensions. Let's start from the top of the head. Relax. Relax your forehead, your eyes, your ears, your facial muscles, your lips. Relax. Feel tensions evaporating from your head. And now, let's move on to your neck muscles. Relax. Shoulders, upper arms, lower arms, hands, fingers. Slowly let them go. Now work your way down the spinal cord. Relax one vertebra at a time. Your thigh muscles, calf muscles, your feet, toes. Feel all tensions melting into Mother Earth. The next step is to scan for any remaining areas of tension and anxieties. Honor them and the conditions that have led to their arising. Gently, ever so gently, let these tensions and anxieties out of the body and your system. Now that the body is completely relaxed, let's slowly bring your attention to the tip of your nose. Breathe. With every in-breath and out-breath, without control and without judgments. There is nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. Simply continue to watch your breath until you hear the sound of the bell. Slowly bring your awareness away from the breath to your ears. Hear what is going on around you, still maintaining a quiet body and mind. Gradually move your attention to the eyes. Gently open your eyes and smile. Be grateful to all the conditions that give you whatever you have before you. You are now ready for the miraculous moment to be the best that you can be.
Thank you, everyone. How do you feel? Actually, it's more for me than for you. It's nerve-wracking standing here before 22 experts. But I hope that you've enjoyed this little exercise. Can I request Dr. Kuo, if you could, during the course of this, you can take a few photos so that I can prove to my president I've been working. So for today, as I said, we're going to talk about humanistic Buddhism. So I thought the first start, we will start by exploring what we mean by humanism in the West and the East as kind of a prelude. Before we go into talking about the humanistic Buddhism that I've identified in, it jumped on its own, in the platform Sutra and in the rabbit's horn. Now, first of all, before I go down the path of the official definition, I'd like to ask you, when I say the word humanism, what do you think of? What do you think of when I say humanism? Yes?
So it's human-centered?
Human-centered. Right. Human-centered. Right. Very good. What else do you think of? So human-centered. So the human condition. Right. What else? Yes?
This worldly.
This worldly. Right. Rather than the world of the divine. Very good. What else do you think of? Humanism. Humanism. Yes?
An emphasis on the well-being of people.
Emphasis on the well-being of the people. The flourishing of the human species. Wonderful. Anything else? So this is a very interesting starting point. So let's bear that in mind and we'll build on it as we look at how the West and the East look at how they explore the human-centeredness, the human condition, the human well-being, and this worldly. Okay, this worldliness. All good answers. Anyway, is that a wrong answer? So the term humanism in the West was actually quite a recent phenomenon. It's about only created in the late 18th, early 19th century by this person, Emmanuel. This is really a term that was developed as an educational concept. And when I knew about that, I thought, oh, that was interesting. It really was an educational concept, and it was meant to highlight civility. So the first use of this term was due to the study of humanities, right? So those of us who are in Buddhist studies, for example, you know that we belong to the discipline of the humanities. What does it mean to be a civil human? But the concept of humanism actually was much earlier, as early as the 5th century BCE. My goodness, how long ago was that? We are in the 21st century, and this is like 2,600 years ago, equivalent to the time of the Buddha. Interesting, isn't it? Already. So that's why I think we have to remember that whatever was happening during the axial age, one of the phenomena is about humanism. Or the concept, it wasn't called humanism at that time, but this whole concept was already building up. And so there is this person, Protagoras, and he said, of all things, the measure is man. Of all the things that they are, and of the things that are not, that they are not. Man is the measure of all things. That's what he's saying. Now, this is actually quite revolutionary during the period of time when the Greek mythology was very strong. Everything is about the gods, the pantheon of gods. And here comes a brave soul who was eventually killed because of this bold statement. And nothing much was known about his work after that, because it was considered unorthodox. But we know that this already started during this period of time, and it was during the time of the Buddha too, and it was during the time of the Axial Age. The concept of humanism already started to grow around the world, West and East. But the real development really took place during the age of the Enlightenment, the Renaissance and all, and it talked about the dignity of man. So we talked about human flourishing just now, right? So what does it mean? Maintaining the dignity of man over the divine. So in this work on the dignity of man, human beings were elevated in the status, because now we are saying that humans have free choice. This is a big, bold concept, because the divine was supposed to control the fate of human beings. That human beings labor for a higher being. So that was the humanists. And the Italian humanists started to emphasize the value of human achievement in this life. So this world, in this life. Rather than seeing that this life I'm just sowing the seed so that I could go to a better place in the future. Okay, so there's now that slight shift, or big shift. Then during the period of the Enlightenment, the Age of Enlightenment is also known as the Age of Reason. Age of Reason. So this is actually the precursor of the scientific period that we are now so familiar with. Science and technology is now part of our life, but not back then. So this is a period where rigorous scientific, political, and philosophical discourse characterized the European society of the 18th century. And this is when morality comes to the forefront, when it's important. So it's about this worldly again. In this human world, how can we live in peace and harmony with others and a respect for the laws of nature? Nature comes in, as opposed to us being the exploiting nature. So that already set up, this way of living where morality becomes important. So what is an ethical way of life? So again, human-centered. Right? It's human-centered. Then comes Karl Marx in his economic and philosophical manuscripts. Interestingly enough, he says that communism as completed naturalism is humanism, and as completed humanism is naturalism. So now he's trying to find or resolve the antagonism between man and nature by putting communism ahead. So he sees this as the positive side of atheism. So we see now the tension between the divine and the humans, right? So initially it's one or the other, and eventually it comes together, bringing nature as well. So humanism. Then we have Bertrand Russell, Why I'm Not a Christian, and in this particular book, he highlights science. So you can see how things move a bit at a time, and one building on the other. Now I'm not going to really go into humanism, I'm just bringing out the history to show you what has been happening, so that when we look at the sutras later and all the interpretations, we can draw upon this, what's in the background of various people's mind. Is really about, so where is the place of human in the big cosmos? With the divine, with nature, how superior? Where in that hierarchy or that network human beings should be. And this has been a discourse that's taken thousands of years. It's not only now. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah? All right. So in terms of humanism, there's something called religious and secular humanism. So the humanism of the Renaissance period is basically religious in character. So there's still the belief in the divine, but how the human dignity can still be brought up, but in the presence of the divine. Whereas in secular humanism, it's different. The divine is now outside that frame. It's all about this world, and with very little influence, if any, of the divine in any way. So you can see that starts to move. And religious humanism is what tries to bridge the two worlds. And I bring this up only because that's what's happening. There are such things called humanistic religions and religious humanism. So for example, you can see here, if you can see, it's a bit blurry, this is a journal for humanistic Judaism. Okay, a society for humanistic Judaism, so humanistic religion. So what's in the foreground is the religion. Now here's an article on Islamic humanism or humanistic Islam. Now the question is, which is primary? So is humanism primary or is Islam primary? And I've been struggling with that as well. Should it be humanistic Buddhism or should it be Buddhist humanism? For the purpose of today, I'm going to use humanistic Buddhism because I'm studying the sutras and a Buddhist teacher's interpretation of the sutra. But I'm putting it there before you that actually there are nuances of differences that we have to be aware of. This thing goes on its own. I must have set some timing. Either that or there's an invisible hand. So, or somebody's telling me, move on, not too much. So, just very quickly, besides humanism, there's also post-humanism you may have heard of, whereby there is a trend towards bringing in nature, bringing in more than the human at the top of the hierarchy. So when we have become too human-centered, we become too selfish, and we forget all the other sentient beings. So post-humanism tries to bring all that in as a response to the extractivism that we are seeing in capitalism and in all the other capitalist models. There's also new humanism that has been promoted by this Indian philosopher, Sarkar, that talks about the humanism of the Orient that expands the concept of society. Society, by definition, is human society, by definition. But he's expanding it, again, in response to the post-humanism movement to say that it should include all living beings. And he calls it a universal society. I'm just raising this to let you know what are some of the trends that are taking place, and a lot more is happening. Any questions so far? Are we all good? So, we talk about human-centeredness, we talk about human flourishing, we talk about this worldliness. Having heard all that, what does human flourishing then mean to you? Given all the debates, discourses that have been taking place by all our various ancestors, what does human flourishing mean to you? Buddhist, non-Buddhist, based on your culture? Aren't we all here because we want to be, a little bit more flourishing today compared to yesterday? But what is it? Can you define it for me? Any thoughts? What is human flourishing? How do we know that we are building a better society? That's what we are doing. That's what we come to education for, isn't it? I mean, we as teachers, we are hoping that students can create a better society. Hopefully with maybe a little bit of what we teach in the classroom. And you will come here, you invest your time. Administrators, we really work so hard to keep this university together for you. What are we contributing? What are we contributing? Any thoughts? What is human flourishing to the chaplains in this room? Yes? Yes, please.
To me, human flourishing means becoming less human-centric and more open to the other realms of existence.
How lovely. Being more open to other realms of existence. The animals, the fungi, those you can see, you can't see, the trees, the air, the water. Everything is becoming so precious. And human cannot flourish in this interconnected world without flourishing of all these elements. Oh, thank you so much. But now you know where that thought comes from. It's a post-humanistic thought. But it's so relevant to today's world. Wonderful, thank you. Any other contributions? Yes, please.
Yes, relieving suffering, especially preventable suffering, starvation and poverty, things that we can do without would be part of human flourishing.
That's right. The reduction of these preventable suffering, the human cost, isn't it? That if we could only, and that means it's something that humans can do to reduce. That's so good. And it is the first noble truth, dukkha. But we don't have to have so much of it. The whole idea is to reach nirvana, which is the reduction of dukkha. Perfect. And we hope the Eight Noble Truth, the Eight Noble Path will help us. Yes. Yes, President Ta.
I think this is a very idealistic question. Are we really flourishing?
Yes.
Depend on which side of the earth that we're standing, okay? We can see that our flourish comes with a cost. At the same time, maybe civilization have expanded. Industrial revolution is, changed for all this building, high-rise, all this technology for us, but at the same time, we destroy so much in order to gain what we have now. So, I don't know, so it's hard to ask this question because seeing forward to the future, are we going to destroy more with this flourishing idea that we think that we are flourish?
Thank you so much, President Ta. That's actually what drove post-humanism. To say that when we become so humanistic, it's all driven by the Western extractive model of capitalism. And now AI is extracting even much more resources from planet Earth. Every prompt that you put into ChatGPT burns so much resources from planet Earth. So be careful with every prompt you put in. Ask first, do you really need to? does it lead to human flourishing? And it's all right. If humans flourish, or it's not all humans who flourish on top of that. It's only this perhaps smaller and smaller group as we see this increased poverty gap who flourish. So who flourishes in there? And as a result of them flourishing, how many have to suffer? So good. So these are some important reflections as we look at why this 2,000-year discourse hasn't reached a conclusion. We are in the human world. And in this human world, we live with a lot of paradoxes. But nevertheless, we all have something we want to aim towards, a better future. And what would that better future be? So I turn to the East to look at what they may have to offer. So Confucianists believe that the meaning of life is to be self-realized in this worldly human existence. Okay? The realization of the noble person. And the Confucian Reformation that has taken place over time has tried to also change. So in the past, the Confucian model is very hierarchical. It's extremely autocratic, dictatorial, right? That the emperor says it all and everybody listens. In Neo-Confucianism, though, the hierarchy has reduced, and a lot of the paternalistic practices have become modified so that values such as liberty, equality, human rights, science, and democracy are being injected into the Confucian understanding of human flourishing. So what are the values? So in terms of human flourishing, right, that in the West are important, such as liberty, such as equality, human rights, are slowly creeping into the Eastern model, which didn't used to have them. Because the real value that Eastern, I guess in the China especially, that the value is harmony above all else. Harmony. Harmony in society. But harmony can also lead, it's like the other side of the coin. Harmony can also lead to subjugation. So that's Confucianism. Taoism, though, it brings in nature. It brings in the blending of the individual self with nature. And the purpose of life is to make that total realization. The place of the human in nature. Oops. So if we look at, if I go back to the Sanskrit and I try to look for a word that may be close enough to this, I look at Buddhist humanism. The human being as opposed to an external divine authority. So if you know, during the time of the Buddha, a lot of the suttas and the sutras were really discourses about, or rather of the Buddhas telling his disciples and the Brahmins what Brahmanism really means. What is a Brahman? It's not necessarily the priest, but rather somebody who exemplifies the character, the noble character that one should aspire towards. So humanism was already in the Buddha's discourses. And in some of the suttas, the human position is considered to be the most supreme, because it's through the human birth that one can reach Buddhahood. So the Buddha was teaching the humans, you want to become the Buddha, you follow this path. And you have to be a human to follow this path. And also it's said in the suttas that the human have enough suffering to work hard towards liberation from that suffering. So the human birth is supreme, and the human birth is one whereby we have to work, we have to put in the right effort in order to reach the liberation. So this part of it is humanistic. Okay, any questions? That's early Buddhism. Now when it comes to Mahayana Buddhism, it brought in a whole cosmic pantheon of bodhisattvas. And then it presents a more cosmic view of humanism, seeing humanity and nature from what we call an anthropocosmic perspective. So the human, but you can see that all the bodhisattvas take on human forms as well. So it's a very anthropocosmic perspective. So it's still humanistic in that sense. Right. That's okay. Then it's time for my next question to you. What insights have you drawn from the humanism of the West and the East that we have just talked about towards your own flourishing? How do you know that whatever value that you value, you're better today compared to yesterday? Or what are the values that guide you? See, this is really back to a value-centered approach, and I think that's the US education, just as in Nantian Institute. They are very values-based. Very. So how do the values really guide you? And how would humanism impact how you look at your values? Yes, please.
So I think in interpreting this question, I'm looking at Buddhism as a humanism from the East, let's say. And in that way, by following the Eightfold Path, what I'm doing is trying to live in such a way that I'm ensuring a measure of safety to myself and others. So that ultimately what I'm thinking and what I'm saying and what I'm doing is for my own long-term welfare and happiness, for the long-term welfare and happiness of those around me. And so in that way, I'm trying to be, I don't know, I suppose the source of my own flourishing and perhaps an encouragement to others to flourish as well.
That's right, so wonderful. That as you build your inner capacity, you will influence the others around you. And the Noble Eightfold Path becomes your path of building on that capacity within you. And it is a human capacity towards discipline, a human capacity towards meditative concentration, which brings you the inner peace that you are looking for. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your contribution. Any other thoughts? Hard questions, isn't it? For a short lecture. You thought you just sit there and take notes. What I've learned is that I really don't have much to teach you, but I thought I'll throw these questions at you so that you have an opportunity to reflect on how what you learn in class, not just this class, but any class, can really help you. And that's why we want to learn. It's not for the knowledge out there. It's not for the corpus of knowledge out there. It's okay. You can do without us. But it's how that corpus of knowledge can help me grow. And as a result of me growing, I help the world around me. I become a better version of myself every day. And that's what I think humanistic Buddhism is. It's how we can be a better version of ourselves. these, learning about Buddhism, learning about psychology, learning about chaplaincy, hey, how can that help me so I can help others? Okay, so now with all that in the background of how we build up our own dignity, build our own morality, build our own discipline, build up our value system, let's now turn to the Platform Sutra. So I mentioned earlier that what I see is how Indian Buddhism was brought to China, and around the 9th century, a form of Chinese Buddhism was born. And then that informed, over the centuries, a form of 20th century Humanistic Buddhism. So let me go into, first, the Buddhist humanism that I talked about earlier was really very much related to Pratitya Samutpada, or the laws of dependent co-origination, and it informs a way of seeing how we are born, how we die, and go through that cycle in the 12 links. So it really points to the suffering of birth and death. That's the major, most crucial suffering. And the way to relieve ourselves from that is by release from attachments, right? From our desires. So that's the form of Buddhism that reached China. And in Mahayana Buddhism, it says that Prajna, at least in the initial days, what came in was the Prajna Paramita Sutra. The highest form of wisdom is this Prajna, and it is, with this Prajna, the way to get out of samsara. So it is all about escaping, right? Escaping from this world. Escaping from this worldly existence of bondage to suffering, of life and death. But that was not the Chinese philosophy at the time. The Confucian system of living is really about this world. How to be a good citizen of this world, to be a good father, to be a good scholar, to be a good noble person, a good court official, and a good emperor. It's about this world. The Chinese also wants to focus on how to be harmonious with people and nature. So it's a very this worldly, right, culture. So therefore, the construction of the Platform Sutra and the fact that it makes a sutra status tells me that there is a very interesting discourse that must have built up in this sutra. And I'd like to say that that was the point where the Indian otherworldliness got transformed into the Chinese disworldliness. That's the humanistic elements that I would like to point out today. The first being Huineng. Huineng is likely not to be a historical figure, and if he is, he wasn't the way he was pictured in the sutra. But let's just look at Huineng, the protagonist. What's interesting about him is that he was not a prince, right? Prince Siddhartha was a prince. Now, in the Chinese population, how many people can become princes? Very few. Most people were what? Farmers, craftsmen. Most people were illiterate. So a very literate, high-profile Prince Siddhartha, people can't identify with. So what this sutra has done is it's created an ordinary person called Huineng, who chops firewood, who is illiterate, but very clever. He's so clever that he can become enlightened. What does this tell me? If he can do it, so can I. So now you give me hope, isn't it? You give people hope. Very humanistic, right? And why can he become enlightened? Because this Chinese can actually interpret the Indian Buddhist tradition and say it in ways that the Chinese can understand. Very clever man. And you do not have to be an intellectual to do that. Humanistic. There was a poetry contest in the Sutra, in the first chapter, between two persons, Huineng and Shen Xiu. Shen Xiu was an aristocratic background, born of aristocratic background, intellectual, and deemed to be the successor. So he's very clever, basically. And everybody thinks that he's going to be the sixth patriarch. But he comes an illiterate, ordinary person, and the two poems immediately shows that Huineng is the one who understands the true nature of our existence. He is the one who managed to understand prajna, of emptiness. So what does it show? So he became the sixth patriarch. It shows that the humanistic appeal is that a Chinese Chan patriarch can be illiterate. Doesn't have to be an aristocratic intellectual. It shows that even an illiterate person can defeat an educated monk. And he was a lay person at that time. You're interested in lay person's research. He was a lay person at that time when he won the poetry contest. Doesn't this give us hope again? It says that everybody has the Buddha nature. And everyone can become enlightened in this life, this worldly, this life. And it doesn't take you having to study a lot or meditate a lot. No, you can do it. What a beautiful story. A very humanistic story to ground everyone and give everybody. So the humanistic Buddhism that I see in this Platform Sutra highlights equality. Equality. Isn't that the value that we are all trying to go for? All of us. We want, I mean, here in the West especially, equality is such an important value. Irrespective of gender, sexuality, educational background, etc. We are all equal. And all we need is perseverance. And this is important to Chinese. Chinese are very diligent, hardworking population. They love to work. And therefore, just say that, you just continue chopping your wood. You can continue, milling the grains. And you will become enlightened. Whatever work you're doing. So this is Chinese reinterpretation. You don't have to go away and meditate in the caves for long days, hours, in order to become enlightened. In this sutra, I've also seen various innovative reinterpretation. So, for example, in the sutra, Huineng was said to have quoted the Vimalakirti Sutra by saying, suddenly, all at once, we return to our original mind. It's what? It's not about reaching nirvana anymore, which is what the Indian goal was, right? The Indian Buddhism goal was to reach nirvana, get out of samsara. It's all about returning to our original mind. And remember, Huineng was a lay person for a while. So Vimalakirti Sutra is a lay person sutra. So that's what he's quoting. And also Huineng is known for his sudden enlightenment. Suddenly. All at once. So it's not just time, but everything in that one moment. Endlessness in that one moment. Beautiful. And you also quoted the Bodhisattva Precept Sutra that says our original nature is pure. So that was what the enlightenment is. We return to our original mind, and that original mind, or original nature is pure. That is the enlightenment. That one has to experience. No amount of words can do it. So that's why he can win the poetry contest. It's nothing to do with words. It's a realization. It's experiential realization. So he's teaching his disciples to see the fundamental purity of your own nature. So that is the human flourishing that he's talking about. The ability to see our own pure nature. Cultivate and put to work for yourselves the Dharma body of your own nature. So again, the nature is pure and the Dharma body is already there. You don't need a Buddha. You don't need someone else to teach you. You don't need the canonical texts. Just put that Dharma body to work. Practice for yourselves the practices of a Buddha. So he's telling you, you do the practice yourself. Nobody can replace and do it for you. Cannot outsource. You've got to do it. Begin and complete for yourselves the path to Buddhahood. You begin it, you complete it. That's the journey. So this is his definition of Buddhahood, the Buddha nature that's in everyone, and that is the equality. He also redefined refuge taking. You know how we say refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha? And we say that when we take refuge in the Buddha, he says it's not the external Buddha. It's the Buddha of the enlightenment of your own minds. So you don't have to worry that there's no more Buddha here. And you don't have to worry that the Buddha is an Indian. You take refuge in the Buddha of your own mind. Those whose delusions do not arise, who have few desires, and who know contentment, free from wealth and sex, they can be called the best of two-legged creatures. That's the Buddha. The best of two-legged creatures, the Buddha. So as long as there's no delusions, few desires, so people go like, oh, I can do that. So I can become the Buddha. That's innovative. The Buddha is not an Indian prince anymore. It's all of us. Take refuge in the truth of your own minds. So the Dharma is in our minds, the purity of your minds. As long as you're free from delusion, you are free from attachment. And when you're free from attachment, that's the freedom. That is the best of what transcends desires. And we all can have it. You don't need a Dharma in the canonical text to give you that. You can just do it by practicing freedom, and that's the real freedom. It's not necessarily freedom from life and death. You notice that? That's a reinterpretation. Very smart. Then take refuge in your own minds. No matter how many afflictions and delusions are present in your nature, no worries, because the real nature is uncorrupted. That's the real Sangha. You don't need a monastic. The real Sangha is in that undeluded self. That is called the best of congregations. So you notice how he has reinterpreted Buddha Dhamma Sangha to relate to the Chinese of the time. Interesting, huh? So clever man. Oh, clever author of the Platform Sutra. Now, we talk about this worldly, right? World affirming. World affirming non-attachment. He says, since ancient times, this Dharma teaching of ours both its direct and indirect versions, has proclaimed no thought as its doctrine, no form as its body, and no attachment as its foundation. So instead of having to learn all these major stuff in the canon that nobody else understands, because most people are illiterate, they cannot understand all that. Tells you, don't worry, be happy, just learn no thought, no form, no attachment in this life. In this life. So how does he do that? Let's look at it. First of all, he reinterprets meditation. You know that farmers cannot meditate. There's no time to meditate. They're in the fields most of the time. And by the time they come home, no time to meditate. So he says, well, do not think that meditation, you know how we have this meditation and then we've got wisdom after that. So precepts, meditation, wisdom. He says, don't think that you have to do meditation to gain the wisdom. Because it's about all enlightenment, isn't it? Don't think that that's the way. In fact, don't think that meditation comes first and then gives rise to wisdom, or that wisdom comes first and then gives rise to meditation. No. In fact, meditation and wisdom, they are not separate because Dharma is non-dualistic. He was the pioneer of this. Indian Buddhism did not have this at all. So it was really in the Platform Sutra. If you really study the Platform Sutra, it's really interesting. You talk about East meets West, it's all in there. And it's sort of like, what it tells me is that as long as we gain insight, that's meditation. You don't sit on a cushion to get meditation. It's all in that insightful moment, whether you're working or whether you are chopping woods. And he says that Pure Land is actually not in the cosmic Western Pure Land, but purity in yourselves. You remember the Bible talks about pure minds? So it's the purity in ourselves is that Western Pure Land. Again, this was innovative. It was here that we start seeing the Western Pure Land, because the Pure Land school was very popular during that time. It says, don't think that chanting is bringing you to some other Western Pure Land. No, it's right here, in your mind. So the way I see it is that the Platform Sutra is one that is quite an extraordinary form of Chinese humanistic Buddhism, because one, we see the layperson. Whereas Indian Buddhism at that time was very monastic. You have to leave the world behind to be in a sangha and to meditate and practice in order to be enlightened and get out of this samsaric cycle. All the householders could do is to make offerings, make dana, and make punya, merits. Whereas here you see now the layperson can become involved in the enlightenment process. And the principle of equality is that Buddha nature is with everyone, anyone. Okay? As long as you see the purity of your hearts. And Hui Neng as the model, showing us that this is viable. All of us can flourish. And it recognizes the individual's ability and responsibility in self-awakening. So it's actually very empowering to know that we all can be enlightened, we all can awaken, because it's not about Buddhahood. Alright, there's a difference. It's not about getting nirvana. It's about enlightening. It's about seeing the true nature of ourselves, of our existence. That is the flourishing. That is the humanism that's being talked about. And therefore, the external authority of a monastic or of any teachings of a Buddha, of the Triple Gem, etc., get all collapsed. But it's not saying that they don't have authority anymore. It's not saying that. It's not dualistic. It's that they're all equal. very, very quick summary of I'm not even summarizing the Platform Sutra. I'm just trying to point out some humanistic elements in here that, of course, I'll build on later when we talk about the rabbit's horn. But before I get there, any questions? It's always very dangerous when I say any questions you don't ask, because then I'll ask you. Oops, sorry. So what does it mean to be human, given the contemporary conditions of existence? So we've talked about, what is like being human, right, during the time of the 9th century in Tang Dynasty, China. Now is the age of AI. Now is the age of science and technology. Oh gosh, what does it mean to be human? It's also like non-stop wars. Time of non-stop, preventable suffering. Yes, please.
I don't have an answer so much as just kind of furthering the question, because we live now in a time of a lot of internet use. And on the internet, we know for a fact that there are dummy accounts that aren't real people, that are furthering, conversations on the internet. And so sometimes you have robots talking to robots, and someone's reading it thinking it's all real. These are all people really arguing and being hateful and mean, and it just seems like the internet, once AI became introduced, which was already kind of a mean place to begin with, the internet. I remember early internet. But it seems like it's even more and more polarized because the robots are doing a lot of the talking. And if we're not paying enough attention, we get sucked into it, and we're all liking and hearting and commenting and doing the same thing ourselves. And so I wonder what it means to be human when so much of our existence is now digital, where it's hard to tell who's a human and who isn't.
That's right. So what makes you different from that avatar? But this is a good question, isn't it, to reflect on? You can put an avatar out there. So what's the difference between an avatar and you?
Yeah, like what's the difference between even me and my Instagram account, let's say? Yeah.
Actually, that's a very good question. You post all your photos and everything on your Instagram account. Can it represent you? Why not? What makes you different from your Instagram account? Stephen, what's the difference?
That's a good question. I hope I've got more going on in my real life than what I post on Instagram. I don't use it a lot.
Yeah, and you should. Right, but your Instagram account is usually all your good stuff.
It's curated either way, because you have people who curate for sympathy as well. And so they post all the bad stuff, because they like the attention that it gets them.
That's right.
So when it comes to our internet personalities, we curate sometimes intentionally, but sometimes unintentionally. But we're still curating. People get to know the real us that way.
It's like layers and layers of delusion. Aren't we creating? Already we've got enough delusion in us. We're trying to see our real nature, and then we project even more layers of delusion. I want to leave this question with you because I think it's an important question. It is a very important question, especially I think as we are University of the West. We are different. We are different because we believe in humanistic Buddhism. But what does it mean? What is so special about your education that you can put out there and say, I am human. And now where do you point to? Say I'm human. And it's no one answer. I cannot point to the fact that I'm kind, therefore I'm human. It's not one thing. Maybe I can point to the fact that I make mistakes. I'm flawed. But that alone doesn't make me a human. Or can I point to the fact that I'm flawed, I suffer, but I know that I have a way out. question with a definitive answer. It's a question that, because the contemporary conditions of existence keep changing, we keep changing. And our answers will keep changing. But it's an important question. Because we're human. And I think at some point in time, somebody is going to say, is it worthwhile being human? I put this question to my colleagues one day. And I said, what would you like to be in your next life? Half my colleagues didn't want to be human in their next life. Because they say humans destroy this planet. Because humans are evil. They don't want to be humans. Do we really want to belong to such a species? Where half the people don't want to be us. What can we do to reverse that trend? I put that out as a mission to you. Maybe I should ask, do you want to be human again in the next life? So on to the rabbit's horn. So as you know, it was written by, in case you do not know, it's written by the Venerable Master. And he brought something called the Chan mind into this. So remember we talked about the pure mind? Now, when I looked at this, I started digging. You know, researchers are dangerous people. We look at a word and we go like, where did Chan come from? I didn't see that in the Platform Sutra. So then I discovered that Chan's school started after the 9th century. So that's why Chan doesn't exist. That word, the character Chan, doesn't exist in the Platform Sutra. But throughout the rabbit's horn, the Venerable Master uses it. And in fact, he calls it the Chan mind. Because people don't understand what is a pure mind either. So this is an introduction from the Venerable Master to say that Chan can only be experienced in our daily human life. So again, he's saying it's humanistic. The practice is in our daily human life. It's not going to be, in the life of a god. It's not going to be that you have to go into a retreat in order to practice, but in your daily life. Then he also uses a lot of examples from the discourses of Chan masters, commonly known as gong-ans, or public cases. Again, that was not in the Platform Sutra. So this was the Venerable Master's introduction into the commentary and using those parables and stories to guide our awakening. Because otherwise, we read that it's too far away. You know, it's a 9th century text. So a particular gong-an that he brought up is rescuing the goose in the bottle. So I'm going to ask you, how does one release a goose in a glass bottle without hurting the goose nor breaking the bottle? Let's check everybody's IQ. I think next time our part of admission criteria to give a book answer. Yes, President Chaka.
How did the goose get in the glass in the first place?
Because the goose was small. Baby goose got in and baby goose grew. And then baby goose cannot, and then adult goose cannot get up. Good question. You see, this is how you need to think. To think outside of the question. Good example. Now with that clue. Any other attempts? You know, we're not all not enlightened yet, right? So.
Well, we can say, when we say release a goose,
yeah.
Maybe we can ask, is a body or his mind?
Yeah.
So if we just release the mind,
yes.
free himself
That's
or
right.
herself, so just make them happy, even stay in the bed, he's released, you know.
That's right. This is you're there, spot on. So the goose is really our Buddha nature.
Yeah.
our pure mind, our Buddha nature. It's trapped in our body, the bottle. So according to the Venerable Master, all it is that you just need to see. Once you see the goose is free. After all, it's a clear glass. What happens is that the goose struggle to try to come out. And we all struggle to help it to come out. It's that struggle that creates the suffering. But the minute we can see that, oh, okay, let it be. So in our daily life, when we are able to see the goose for what it is and the bottle for what it is, we are liberated.
That was a good answer, Dr. Paul. I was going to suggest Dawn dish soap.
I love that. I love that. The poor goose getting toxic dish soap. So what is liberation in this world? According to the Venerable Master, he says, most people live a deluded life because they cling onto the 5 desires and the 6 sense objects. Right? So the 5 desires are wealth, sex, fame, food, and sleep. Okay, how many of us are guilty? And the 6 sense objects of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, guilty again. So we use that as our sign of our identity and therefore of security. And as a result of our attachments, right, we're living a deluded life when we're just constantly trapped in that glass bottle and struggling in it. So that's the source of our dukkha. Liberation is when we just do not abide. Glass bottle, okay. You put me in a cage, okay. You let me run around freely on the ground, still just okay. When I can do that, I can abide anywhere and abide nowhere. Therefore, I don't have this arising and cessation of thoughts. Because it's those arising and cessation of thoughts that cause the suffering. And that is when ignorance ends and I'm liberated. Yeah. So that's how the Venerable Master tries to explain to us what liberation really means. Okay? It's non-clinging to what we tend to cling to. So then coming to non-thought, which is the core of Huineng's teachings. And the way the Venerable Master explains it, he says, non-thought it's not about not having any thoughts, because it's not possible. Right? Thought is automatic. You can't control it and say, don't think. The minute you say don't think, you're thinking. It doesn't work. So therefore, non-thought is non-abiding in the past, present, and future. What is non-abiding in past, present, and future? So, by not reminiscing about past, that means what is the word in psychology? They call it reminiscing.
Ruminating?
Rumination. Thank you. So by not ruminating, one is already practicing meditative concentration. Then, by not clinging to the sensory objects that you encounter at this point, one practices discipline. By not having illusions of the future, that's daydreaming of the future, one cultivates wisdom. So past, present, future, but at the same time, also the 3 training of the discipline, of meditative concentration, and of wisdom, all packed in. And once you put all these in together, they're so smart. That's non-thought. I thought this framework was brilliant. So he says, this is the awakened and practical way of thinking. That thoughts, let them naturally arise, naturally falling away, without becoming attached to them. That's how you bring about human flourishing. Right? The problem is that we become so attached to my view, my ideology, my land, my everything. And that's how we end up with this endless samsara, this suffering in the world. Chan mind, going back to the Chan mind, non-thought is not having all this judgment, non-duality, not having distinctions, not having these discriminatory thoughts. So he says to practice non-thought. And to do so, do not evaluate, do not judge. And that is the true understanding of non-duality. Because non-duality is a concept. It's very hard. What does it translate to in the human worlds? And the Venerable Master uses being non-judgmental. And we can understand that, being non-judgmental. Seeing things because of their conditions, rather than say you're a bad person. So, I think what the Venerable Master has done is to contemporize some traditional Buddhist practice. He says that when we see the prajna, the emptiness of our intrinsic nature, we see ourselves. And when we see ourselves, we attain Buddhahood. Because the Venerable Master often tells people to say, I am Buddha, I am Buddha. And then people are like, no, I can't say that I'm not Buddha. I'm not an Indian prince, and I'm not enlightened, etc. But the Venerable Master says, no. As long as you can see that intrinsic nature and you can, understand yourself, you have attained Buddhahood already. So he is actually equating enlightenment and Buddhahood. You don't have to wait for another life to become the Buddha. This is another step forward from the Platform Sutra. It's not only just seeking enlightenment, but he's saying that as the Buddha already, I am Buddha, because I can see the Buddha nature in me. And to reinforce, this is what he said. The deluded mind is mastered by the lotus, the awakened mind masters the lotus. Now this is from here, so from the Platform Sutra. The Venerable Master say, the goal is to achieve enlightenment rather than aspire to a specific form of chanting or reading the sutras a particular number of times. So who is he directing this to? To many practitioners who says, I must do 108 vows, I must do 100,000 chants of the name of the Buddha. The Venerable Master say, no. It's not. Once you do that, you are doing the deluded mind. And therefore, it's mastered by that lotus. So it becomes that chanting that's mastering me. Just like the AI that's mastering me. As opposed to me using it to see the truth. So I'm using that chanting in order to see the minds, the pure nature of the mind. Just before I came here, I was on the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation's Radio National program, and they asked me to talk about human hope in the age of AI. And that's because my background was AI 40 years ago. So I told them about the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra, and in there was the concept of an illusory being, Huanren, illusory being. And this illusory being was created by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as a teaching tool, as a lotus. And just using that, and this illusory being is very clever. You tell it to do anything and it will do it. But it doesn't have consciousness. So it cannot become enlightened. But it's very clever. It's used as a teaching tool for novice bodhisattvas and trainees to learn about prajna, about emptiness. Now, if we see it that way, just like we see AI that way, we will be able to understand, so the whole world is very illusory. Everything is illusory. And therefore, you realize, I too, this is also illusory. Then I will then delve deeper and deeper to find my true nature. and see that conditional existence of myself and that emptiness behind it all. Then that illusory being is useful as a teaching aid. But if I become so addicted to that illusory being and I say, okay, illusory being, give me food, give me clothes, because it can do everything. It's like the genie in Aladdin's lamp. If I end up doing that, I become trapped in the lotus. So that's how I think I would see AI. How AI can help me to realize and be enlightened. So, what the Venerable Master say? Instead reciting the name of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, it is more beneficial to emulate the Bodhisattva's kindness and compassion in daily life. So I'm bringing it full circle to let everybody see that Humanistic Buddhism is about practicing in daily life, but guided by what people need, what the contemporary conditions are, and what the teachings we have learned from the Buddha. So, Venerable Master Xing Yin says, Huineng dedicated his life to spreading the Dharma and was never lax in his work. An awakened person is confident of his or her abilities and feels a special responsibility, to spread the Dharma for the benefit of all sentient beings. An awakened person does not shirk responsibility in search of an easy life. Instead, he or she never hesitates to shoulder others' pain. I hope this kind of give us some inspiration to think about human flourishing. What does it mean to be human? Ability to shoulder responsibility for the benefit of others. The ability to never hesitate to shoulder others' pain. To reduce suffering for all. To build a better version of ourselves. And hence a better future. I hope that brings out the aspirations of bodhisattvas and the Venerable Master building University of the West and all these institutions around the world that are basically big black holes, very idealistic. But his passion is really guided by this. And it takes all of us, administrators, teachers, students, to make this happen. And in the process, we are that little cogwheel that turn the world for the better. It's built on idealism, built on vision for human flourishing. That could be, of course, said in many different ways, but I thought this particular quote from here, the rabbit's horn, really speaks to me, and I hope that it's kind of a summary. Any questions? You know what's coming up next. Maybe there is, I don't know, do you want to leave now and end, or would you like to have a little bit of discussion among yourselves? Dr. Kwa tells me I can go anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours. It depends on you. I was just thinking that, whether you'll be interested in coming together and just reflecting on what you've heard so far. Whether you want to do it as a group here or in smaller breakout groups, what do you usually do? Or what do you prefer to do for your flourishing?
Any
Preference?
any bodhisattva want to stay up to share your reflection and then share to your thought to everyone?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I just want to have some comments regarding to the subject you presented it. I remember that I read somewhere, I don't remember exactly, but a particular report mentioned about one detail, that for one person, just like ourselves here, to survive a day, we probably rely on about 50 to 60 other people to provide everything that we need to survive 24 hours. So we're talking about efficiency here, using the resources. I don't think any of the living things, any animals or any sentient beings, have some same kind of demand to survive like a human being. So the question is, we're talking about AI. The AI right now is still exploding and still progress quickly. And probably people already know the reason that AI can provide those kind of answers quickly, because it's feeding by data from human beings. But look at the potential development of AI. It will get to the point of a super intelligence within about maybe 10 years. And by that time, the AI, I believe it won't require the feeding data from human beings. Now we're talking about a new entity, a new monster that human beings created. So what are we going to do? I think if I was AI, let's say, assuming I'm AI.
Yes, reborn as AI.
Right. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe out human beings. Because they're not very efficient. They demand a lot of resource, and that's why they destroy the world. If we look at everything that come up, even the virus, cancer, all kind of things, it's not original from the nature. Even the nuclear weapon is not exist in the nature. It's created by human being.
Yes.
So in the other words, and the way I look at that is the human being destroy themselves. Now AI can help that process a little bit faster. That's how I look at it.
The destruction process, yes?
Yes.
Okay, that's one view, and I think that's a very, there's a view that's also in the world today, and many of the various theories are built on that view. That we have to degrowth, we have to basically depopulate because of the destruction of the human race. And I told you, half my colleagues don't want to be reborn as humans. What will your response be? The quote.
Well, everyone think about your vision about flushing.
Yes.
Do you think the flushing is a kind of the better and the more efficiency, more rational, more, if using that way, you are AI, just like you said. Because in AI, everything need to be faster, rational, more comprehensive. If we're using this value to define flushing, then probably just like destroy, because everyone is not efficient. People, you need to sleep. AI robot never sleep. Yeah, right? So in this standard, human being is more weaker because you need sleep. You need to find time to eat, right? AI, no, plug in, everything is fine, right? So probably that is the kind of thing I believe in the Chan or the Zen. It's a kind of the critical thinking. We must think about some presumption to doing that. Just like Venerable Juewei already said, okay, like even Huinan or later our Master Xing Yun, they continue to question about the Indian Buddhism, Chan Buddhism in Tang Dynasty, and they reinterpret and they give the new thought and new direction fit into our contemporary life. Okay, so when I listen, because the Venerable Juewei is continuing challenging us, right? So I think about because from the beginning you say, what is a human flourishing, right?
Yes.
And what is the kind of, so if we think the older nature have a high tree, also have a low grass, that is the nature, right? If we have a smart guy, and then we also have people with, now we call ignorant, but at least it's ordinary man is nature. That is how the world thinks is kind of the nature world, right? So maybe we can just think about ways, say, the human flourishing have to build upon what kind of the assumption. It depending on what everyone have your own vision about the future, right? The world should be in which way is called ideal way, right? Buddhism talk about pure land, but maybe you have your own answer. And I believe Chan Buddhism allow us to ask ourselves, our nature, our human being, to think about the vision. That is what I saw.
Very good, thank you. Other comments? Yes, please.
I mean, I will say when I first became a Buddhist, the story of the sixth patriarch resonated a lot with me because I come from a working class family, and a lot of religions have these kind of elitist attitudes where those in lower classes can't really access this kind of divine truth. And yet, through the sixth patriarch, we learn that in fact, those of us whom like him, he was called a barbarian for being from southern China, we can become enlightened too. It's not inaccessible to us. And then you mentioned your colleagues, and you asked them, you want to be reborn as a human. And there's this idea that humans have this innate terribleness to them. But yet I also think being reborn in the human realm would be greatly beneficial to other humans so that we can end that terribleness and make us better as a whole. Rather than separating ourselves from humans, we can immerse ourselves with the humanness and not draw this kind of duality between the human and the divine. We can purify ourselves. So I've always thought about being reborn as a human to continue this path, just to help other people and guide them along the Buddhist path.
Yeah, thank you. That's the Bodhisattva vow.
Yeah. Anyone?
Yes,
Yes.
President Ta.
Before I say a few words, thank you very much for your lecture. I think from your lecture you can see that Buddhism have also evolved based on two different masters. Venerable Master Xing, I think humanistic Buddhism was necessary at that time because of the human condition at that time, and his own experience also. So his master and himself have walked through a very turbulent era of human history. Lots of suffering. It's not like we don't have suffering right now, but those suffering was a different time. And he could really see that Buddhism could be a salvation for many people, but it cannot limit it to chanting and meditation on your own. But how can you use Buddhism to better yourself as well as other people's life, with the hope, I just analyze it, with the hope that if we can propagate humanistic Buddhism, we can reduce suffering, the kind of suffering that he had witnesses and he had experienced, and his master also experienced. But my question is, okay, what's the next step of humanistic Buddhism? Will it become a different term to fit the current situation? Because what we see right now, again, is a very different experience during the time that he grew up. Right? There was a lot of natural disaster, there are lots of warfare, And now we do have warfare also, and we have also global warming. The number of people that impacted today will be, I would say that will be 10 times more than 100 years ago. How can Buddhism, humanistic Buddhism, evolve into responding to the current present needs? Yes, I don't know. I think what humanistic Buddhism calling for the practices, like the practice,
Yes.
is that enough to apply the practices at this present time to reduce suffering? And what can we do more? And what have we failed to do to see the current condition? Am I making sense?
You are. You are. Thank you so much, President. Yes.
So that's I will end there.
Yes. Well, the way I see humanistic Buddhism, first of all, it has a very heavy emphasis on humanistic values of kindness, of compassion, of sympathetic joy and equanimity, the four immeasurables, and all the other supporting values as well. So that, if nothing else, we purify our own minds to be able to operate from a space of inclusivity and understanding. It also focuses on relations. It's very relational kind of practice. We look at humanistic Buddhism and why it focuses so much on volunteerism. Because it's through volunteerism that we can extend, extending out and building these many, many cogwheels, turning the bigger infrastructure. So if I look at what the Venerable Master has done and how we could emulate, he often has a vision that he wants to, for example, let's take an example of the public holiday. The Buddha's birthday is a public holiday in Taiwan. He couldn't do it in the 1950s, but eventually in the 2000 and something, it became true. But it actually took him 50 years to get that vision into implementation, into reality. But in order to do that, he has actually built up a lot of infrastructure. What we will need to do now is to take that spirit, bear the responsibility. So for example, we have to understand what these conditions are. I find personally, right now one of the biggest problems creating mental health issues is social isolation. Because of all of us living within a mobile phone. That small little device traps our body and mind. So I am putting forward the concept of the metaverses. And that concept came when FB became Meta and promoted metaverse. I cannot live in metaverse. I want to do metaverses. So it is multiverses of loving kindness. Just communities of loving kindness. And since then, that's what I've been doing. I've been trying very hard to pull together different communities and promote the fact that whether through my website resources, whether through different, I guess, next November, I'm trying to also launch what I call meta festivals. In-person gathering of people to just in kindness, breaking the social isolation, breaking our addiction. We can even come together and just make dough, make bread. Just get those fingers away from the phone. Or crafts. I think what we need to do is that in communities, I actually believe a lot in the power of communities, as opposed to everything being top down. If various communities, and which is what the Venerable Master did, I think what he did was he built many, many BLIA chapters, which are communities, and have them promote something in kindness to reverse some of the destruction. So can we be, so one person requires 50 to 60 persons to live, great statistic. Can I be one of those 50 and 60 to help others? So then there's no loss. You know, so we are all helping one another, as opposed all of us feeding one person or 1% of the population. But if we can do that across the board, and how to do it so that it is fair, it is non-dual, it is selfless. And that's why the Buddhists practice. And that's why the importance of the values. And I strongly believe in one thing, education, where differences can be made. When we come together in learning communities like this and explore these difficult topics and real questions, and together keep exploring how we can turn our ideas into action. And not be afraid, be courageous to go out and try new things and just get it done. I don't know whether the Metta Festival will work, but I'm doing it anyway. Because I believe in it. And I think that's what the Venerable Master did. He believed in that big vision. You just have to keep trying.
Right.
And do something. I have the human body. I'm endowed with a PhD from the University of the West. I think I have to do honors for all the conditions that have given me what I've got today. If we all let it move in a positive direction and not be turned by the lotus, we'll be in charge of the lotus. Thank you, thank you. Shall we check out? Shall we check out? To bookend? Yeah?
Yes.
Is that okay? So let's dedicate the merits of what we have come together for.
Let us now dedicate the goodness of what you have done to all living beings. May kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity pervade all worlds. May we cherish and build affinities to benefit all beings. May Chan, Pure Land, and precepts inspire equality and patience. May our gratitude and humility give rise to great vows.
Thank you, everyone. I wish that the merits of today's session can be dedicated to the awakening of all sentient beings. Thank you. If your travels take you to Australia, please come to visit us in the Teen Institute.
Actually, in University of Juewei, we have an MOU with the Nanting Institute. We can exchange the students. So Venerable Juewei welcome every University of Juewei student or take chance to go to Nanting Institute to have experience. And now we have a power to thank you, Venerable Juewei. You can our face here. You want to take a picture?
Picture.
Yeah.
Very good, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Juewei, and thank you everyone to come to here to have this lecture, ISHB lecture. And welcome everyone to continue our future program. And thank you everyone. Thank you.